The vast majority of you are almost certainly trying to have some level of cardiovascular fitness. You almost certainly want some degree of strength, and it in fact can improve other aspects of our daily life. An optimal fitness program is therefore one that checks off the major boxes that science tells us are important for health span and for lifespan, and that can also help us improve various aspects of performance and improve various aspects of aesthetics. Today, we are discussing ways to improve your fitness. Okay, let's talk about the tools to improve your fitness. The first tool is to mesh your zone 2 cardio with your daily activities. So for those of you that don't know, zone 2 cardio is the type of movement that we typically call cardio exercise that elevates your heart rate somewhat, increases your breathing somewhat, but that still allows you to carry out a conversation without having to pause or to gasp in order to complete your sentences. Okay, so that's a general rule of thumb for zone 2 cardio. Now, for those of you that use a fitness tracker, you can monitor whether or not you are in zone 2 cardio very precisely. But if you're like me and you don't use a fitness tracker, it's very easy to know if you're in zone 2 cardio because, again, it's that level of output that puts you right below or somewhat below the threshold where if you were to exert yourself with any more intensity, that you wouldn't be able to complete your sentences. Now, this could, of course, be evaluated by jogging with someone or walking with someone or hiking with someone and carrying out a conversation. If somebody isn't available, you could, of course, do this by trying to speak out loud and have a conversation with yourself. Or if you want another way to monitor whether or not you're in zone 2 cardio without having to use a fitness tracker, you could simply ask yourself whether or not you are maintaining a level of output that increases your heart rate and your breathing, but that allows you to maintain purely nasal breathing the entire time. Any of those approaches will tell you more or less whether or not you're in zone 2 cardio. Get 200 minutes per week minimum of zone 2 cardio, but that you don't need to schedule that as time on the treadmill. If you want to, great. But what was communicated to me from Dr. Andy Galpin is that zone 2 cardio is immensely beneficial. It's not going to impede, and in fact, it's going to improve other aspects of fitness, and that it does not have to impede, and it in fact can improve other aspects of our daily life. The second tool that I've incorporated into my fitness regimen, and that I believe can be of great benefit to, frankly, everybody, is to start including low repetition, pure strength work. Now, some of you may already be doing low repetition, pure strength work, but I believe that most people don't. Most people who do resistance training are using either machines or free weights or some combination of those, or perhaps are using body weight. And they tend to focus on repetition ranges from about 5 and usually more like 6 repetitions out to about 10 and perhaps 15 repetitions. Now, of course, doing resistance training in repetition ranges of 5 to 15 reps per set, provided it's done at sufficient intensity, so either to failure or close to failure, of course, in good form, is tremendously beneficial. It can help build strength, it can enhance hypertrophy. There is tremendous value to training in those repetition ranges. But when I sat down with Dr. Andy Galpin to discuss resistance training specifically, he made it very clear that at least for some portion of one's yearly training cycle, so perhaps 8 weeks or 10 weeks, or in the case that I adopted, 12 weeks, there is tremendous benefit to training in the 3 to 5 repetition range, and maybe even lower. So the second tool of training specifically for strength in this 3 to 5 repetition range is something that I started to incorporate after I sat down to record that series. And I'll just tell you a few of the benefits that I've experienced, and then I'll tell you the specific protocol that makes it very easy to do this. The most obvious benefit to me was that I got much stronger, and that strength persisted such that when I went back to using higher repetition ranges, so typically I train with weights or machines in the 6 to 10 repetition range, sometimes a little higher, sometimes a little lower, but never before had I specifically trained in the 3 to 5 repetition range exclusively for a period of 10 to 12 weeks. And when I did that, I, of course, gained strength, but that strength stayed with me such that when I returned to higher repetition ranges, I could use more weight in good form, and that, of course, enhanced strength and hypertrophy further. In addition, there was another effect that was, at least to me, very unexpected, which was that my cardiovascular training improved significantly. And the logical interpretation of why that would be is simply that the muscles got stronger And those same muscles are being incorporated into the cardiovascular, let's call it endurance work that I'm doing on other days. And therefore, I can carry out those cardiovascular training sessions in better form for longer periods of time. The next tool I'm about to describe relates to your cardiovascular training, and it's a tool that can greatly improve your cardiovascular fitness with a limited amount of time commitment. But that is not to say it is easy. What I'm referring to is the so-called Sugarcane, and it is a very efficient yet somewhat brutal way to increase your cardiovascular output. So the Sugarcane is the type of protocol that you would incorporate once in the period of a week, but certainly not every week. It's the kind of thing that you might throw in once every 2 weeks or once every 4 weeks as a replacement for your other high-intensity interval training. The Sugarcane involves selecting some form of exercise that you can do at high intensity safely. That, of course, will differ between individuals. For some of you, it will be a stationary bike. For others of you, it will be a road bike. For others of you, it will be running, and for others of you, it will be rowing. The exact form of exercise is not important. What is important is that you can generate a lot of intensity. So you're going to be doing some sprint-like work, although not all-out sprints, except on the final round. I'll explain where all this is going in a moment. But again, you need to select a movement that you can do without injuring yourself while still performing a movement at high intensity. The Sugarcane is pretty straightforward in structure. It involves 3 rounds, after a brief warm-up, of course. So you're going to do 3 to 5 minutes of jogging or jumping jacks or skipping rope, something to get your core body temperature up so that you're prepared to do the high-intensity work. And then there are only 3 rounds of high-intensity work, and they go as the following. In round 1, you're going to take 2 minutes, so you'll need to set a timer for 2 minutes, and you're going to go the maximum distance that you can in that 2 minutes. So run the maximum distance that you can for 2 minutes, or cycle the maximum distance that you can for 2 minutes, or VersaClimber the maximum distance that you can for 2 minutes. Whatever you select, you're going to do that as far and as fast as you can for the duration of 2 minutes. And then you're going to rest 2 minutes. So 2 minutes of work, then rest 2 minutes. Then in round 2, you're going to go the same distance that you did in round 1, and you're going to take as much time as you need to do that distance as fast as you can. And then in round 3, you're going to go all out, again, as fast and as safely as you can for the same duration that you did in round 2. And your goal is to go at least as far as you went in round 1. And if there's still time left, you're going to continue to go all out, again, as fast as you safely can, until the entire duration is completed. So it's really just 3 rounds with 2 rest periods in between round 1 and round 3. And then I highly recommend that after round 3, that you do some sort of dedicated cool down. So instead of just flopping onto the bench or the floor or the lawn, that you walk around slowly until you recover your breathing. The reason I like the Sugarcane as a tool that one implements once every, say, 2 to 4 weeks as a replacement for one's typical high-intensity interval training, if you provide the right intensity in round 1 and round 2 and round 3, it is sure to elevate your heart rate substantially, and in doing so, improve your VO2 max, which is correlated with all sorts of important metrics related to health span, performance, and lifespan. The next category of tool to improve your fitness relates to breathing or respiration. A great pattern of breathing to incorporate during rest between sets is something that I've talked about before in other contexts, which is the physiological sigh. The physiological sigh is a deep inhale through the nose to maximally or near maximally inflate your lungs, and then a second very brief inhale, and it's necessarily brief because your lungs are already pretty full, to maximally inflate your lungs and to make sure that any of the little sacs, the little alveoli of your lungs that have collapsed during the exercise exertion will reinflate. And then a long exhale until lungs empty. So I'll demonstrate it right now, as I've done many times before, but if you haven't seen it or heard it before, it's 2 inhales followed by an extended exhale, and it goes like this. You'll notice that the inhales were through the nose and the exhale was through the mouth. That's the ideal way to do it for a number of reasons, but 2 inhales through the nose and a long extended exhale through the mouth, the so-called physiological sigh, is, as far as we know, the fastest way to shift your nervous system from so-called sympathetic drive to more parasympathetic drive, from a state of greater alertness to a state of greater calm. Now, the reason to do this between sets of resistance training is that the more that you can shift yourself from sympathetic drive to parasympathetic drive, that is from alert to calm in between sets, the more energy and focus you can devote to exertion during your work sets. Okay, so one way to do this that's very convenient and very effective is to consider the last repetition of your set a physiological sigh, which is not to say, okay, I want to be very clear, which is not to say that you should do the physiological sigh during your set. In fact, I recommend you do not do that, but rather if you're doing 6 repetitions of a given exercise and you, let's say, fail on the 6th, or you do that 6th repetition and you're just close to failure, because again, your work set should be to failure or close to it most of the time, then set down the weight, and then you're going to do the next repetition as the physiological sigh, meaning you're not going to do the movement. You're going to think of doing a physiological sigh as the last repetition of every set, not during the last repetition of the resistance training movement.